Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are so excited to present to you a session called Why Quiet is Critical, Supporting Introverts in Education. And today I have the distinct honor to present with two of my favorite introverts and excellent literacy leaders who I've gotten to know really well over the last few years. So we're going to take a moment to introduce ourselves more in a moment, I should say, but I'm so happy to be working with Josh Flores here out of Alabama and Natalie Croney, who is here out of Kentucky. First, and I'm Heather Rocco out of New Jersey. First, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what the plan is for today. So we are going to just spend a couple minutes talking about what introversion is and what it isn't, just so we clarify, because sometimes there's some misconceptions about what it means to be an introvert. Then we're going to move to Natalie, who's going to talk about supporting introverts who are in our classroom, our students. Then Josh is going to take over and talk a little bit about how he, as an introvert, works with colleagues and also supports his introverted colleagues. And then I'll conclude the session by talking a little bit about ourselves as introverts and what we do to take care of ourselves in a busy space that is school. So without further ado, I am going to take a moment and pass it over to Josh, who's going to do a better introduction of who he is, what he does, and then his favorite introvert celebrity / literary character, because we're English teachers. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Josh Flores. I am an ISFJ. If you know what your Myers-Briggs personality test results are, I'm an ISFJ, introvert, I for introvert. And I think I'm in my 14th year, going on my 14th year in this career of professional education. I've been a classroom teacher. I've been a university researcher and trainer. I've been a state level director, and I've been a district-wide curriculum specialist for pre-K through 12. And right now I'm an independent consultant working with school districts in Montana. So it's been a wild ride, and it's great to be here to share, one of my passions, which is talking about being an introvert and how that fulfills me. My current big brain crush, as far as introverts go, is Mindy Kaling, because I just read her book, Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me? And it is fantastic. She really, really touches on the anxiety, the paranoia, the overthinking that introverts go through. So I recommend it.
Hi, I'm Natalie Croney, and I am going into my 10th year of teaching. I teach at the high school level. I also work with new educators, so I coach them, and I am the department chair in my school. So I'm really excited to be talking to you. I am an INFJ, and my celebrity introvert crush would have to be J.K. Rowling. I think that she's a perfect example of a very vivid inner world.
Great. Good morning, friends. So happy to be here with you. I am Heather Rocco, and I too am an INFJ. And I am currently the K-12 supervisor in the school district of the Chathams, where I've been for the last 9 years. Before that, I was a department chair at a high school nearby, and I was there for 10 years. So I am 20 years into education and loving it. And I have the privilege to be an Ed Collab member, so I get to be involved in all the wonderful work that Chris Lehman does with and for educators. My introvert celebrity crush is Barack Obama. And I didn't realize how introverted he was because he doesn't present to me as an introvert. But I'm reading Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, right now. And she talks about no matter where they live or in what space they go, he needs to have what they lovingly call his hole, where he can go and be by himself and surround himself with books. And I'm just so impressed then by the way he moves through the world and interacts with so many people, but is really an introvert at heart. So I aspire to be President Obama. Okay, so we're going to dive in to our content this morning. As I said, we are going to start with what it means, what introversion means. So this just gives you a rundown of what people think it means. And there are many misconceptions about introverts, that we're socially awkward, which can be true. I am admittedly socially awkward, but that we don't like people, or that we're shy, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. Book nerd is one of them. You happen to be talking to 3 book nerds, but that's not always the case of introverts. And people who just say that we just don't have the capacity to be extroverts, like we're just not talented enough to be the extroverted, gregarious person. But what introversion really means is actually that it's a kind of a broad term that speaks to what we need to do to recharge, who we need to be, the actions we need to take in order to feel energized. And we need alone time. We need quiet in order to really get ourselves geared back up to do all the things that perhaps extroverts do. But that's what's most critical to introverts. When you look at, on the next slide, the comparison between extroverts and introverts, it's about the recharge. And extroverts don't need or are energized by kind of groups of people, whereas introverts are recharged by being alone. So when you look at extroverts, and I'll talk a little bit about one of my best friends. Well, I'm married to an extrovert, first of all. But on that next slide, the extroverts are people who, when they are starting to feel drained, they actually look for conversation. They look to get involved in some kind of discussion. One of my best and dearest friends, Lynn, talks on the phone every morning on her ride into work, on her ride home from work, to another extroverted friend. And I say to her lovingly, you can call me, but no, I'm not going to answer unless it's an absolute emergency, because my commute is downtime for me. Her commute is downtime for her as well, but she does that through talking with friends. Extroverts tend to enjoy a party, tend to enjoy the large gatherings, whereas introverts really are the homebody people. I often joke that once I go home, it takes a lot of energy for me to go back out. That we prefer to communicate in writing mostly. Sometimes I even ignore my texts because I need a break, but that's our preferred method. And that we really need the solitude. It's not just want, we need it. And if we don't have it, we tend to not function at our best capacity. So it's something to be really mindful of when an introvert is kind of looking for some alone space, whether it's a partner in your home, a child in your home, or a colleague at work, that it is critical for them to have that, because it will make them better at whatever task is ahead of them. Now, introversion and extroversion isn't black and white. There is a term called an ambivert, and there are folks who kind of can do both and do both well. I have a colleague who talks about how very much he's an extrovert, loves to talk, loves to get into good conversations, but he always does better if he has just a 5-minute time frame of recharge, 5 minutes on his own quiet, and then he can kind of go back out and do all the things that he needs to do. So it is a continuum. It's not one or the other. And then the last point I want to make before I turn it off to Natalie is the difference between being introverted and being shy. And I think that's the most common misconception. Introverts are not necessarily shy. I don't consider myself a shy person. I like to meet new people. I enjoy conversations with new folks. I don't get nervous or anxious when I'm interacting with people. Someone who is shy has that anxiety, that frustration, that stress just by being around other folks or engaging in social interactions. Whereas an introvert, it's really about they're just drained by social interactions. That doesn't mean they don't or can't or feel anxious when having them. So I think that's a really important distinction to make, because Natalie's going to take over here and start talking about students. You're going to have shy students, but we're really focusing on the introverted students today and kind of how to attend to their needs. So Natalie, pass it off to you.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we'll be talking about is how to tell the difference between when you're dealing with somebody who is socially anxious about the interaction and when you're dealing with someone who is introverted and needs time to recharge. We know that our classrooms often follow what the business world wants. And right now, the business world looks for people who are able to do that collaborative activity. So sometimes by the time our students who are introverted get to us, they are just worn out because they have expelled more energy within the day than they've received. So what I want to make sure that we know is what an introverted student may look like. If you find that you have a student who rarely, if ever, talks in your classroom, but when you look at their work and you read over their writing, they have this very strong and loud sort of depth of thinking. You may be dealing with an introvert. You will also find that your introverts are more linked to asking the why and the how, and they'll be more drawn to the questions that deal with the why and the how. Small talk might not be something that they're interested in at all. In one of the slides, I quoted a Colorado teen who was talking about, I don't like to talk just to talk. We want to make sure that what we're thinking about is honored within that space. Um, you may get a massive eye roll from some introverts when it's time to do group work because they prefer to work individually. It's not that they don't like people, it's just the task of getting into groups and trying to harness whole class activity. They think about how much energy they're going to have to expel to do that, and it can be a turnoff for them. They may even speak quietly. And again, it doesn't mean that they think quietly, but they may speak quietly. They often observe people before they engage in a task because a part of what's important for an introvert, if you're going to be judicious with the energy that you're expelling within a group, you need to look at what's the most efficient way to use that energy. So they will observe. So the tools that I'm going to be giving you today on how to include and empower introverts within the classroom are going to go from those individual restorative practices that help your students, introverted students, get that energy back, to tools that empower them to engage within whole classroom activities. If while I'm talking, if something strikes you, if there's a strategy that hits you, I encourage you to go to hashtag the EdCollab gathering, hashtag 2. The information that you leave will definitely help another educator out in that regard. So the restorative practices that we can engage in that will also help the entire class include independent reading and independent writing. This could be the first 10 minutes of class to have silent, sustained reading. This is something that we know all of our students need, but your introverted students need this because I see you, Josh. They need this because it enables them to have a moment to regroup and to settle into those quiet spaces and just charge up for whatever task you're going to be asking them to do for the rest of that day. That independent writing that you have them do, it can be free writing if that's something that you do within your course, or you can start with an essential question that has depth to it and have them working on that also to give them just a ramp to get into those whole class activities. I think it is not so important to grade it. I don't think that it actually should be a graded activity because that sustained reading is something they need practice with reading, they need practice with writing. We know this, but the extra benefit to the introverts is that recharge time. So there's no need to really grade that. Building on to that, think, pair, share is something that we know about and we've heard about in the education world, but I don't know if we've always thought about think, pair, share as something that helps introverts out. When I think of think, pair, share, I think of recharge, warm up, and contribute. They get to have some time in the quiet, thinking about what it is that you want them to be thinking about. They get to talk to a small group of people, which doesn't expel as much energy. So they get their thinking sharpened as well as get to sharpen the thinking of others. And then it's shared out in the classroom. And your introvert may not be the person who is responsible for doing that sharing, but you welcome the thoughts of the introvert into the classroom as a whole. And that is a great benefit. A woman I know by the name of Jennifer Gonzalez has more information on Think, Pair, Share on her website called the Cult of Pedagogy. So if you want to know more about that, you can definitely get those resources there. Now, there are times when we're going to have to do teamwork. We need to do teamwork. We need to be able to collaborate in whole groups. But there is a way to help empower introverted students to do that. When I think about group events, I think about them like hopscotch. I don't know if you're familiar with double dutch. It's more double dutch than hopscotch, where I spent a lot of time as an introverted student or as an introverted person trying to figure out exactly when I can jump in to conversations. It's not that I'm not thinking, I'm thinking the whole time. But sometimes by the time that my thought is fully formed, the conversation has moved on. And I find that that happens with introverted students also. So the thing that we want to be aware of is, do your students know how to work in a group? My first year of teaching, I noticed that students knew how to be in a group, but not how to work in a group. So when we're talking about consensus building, they need to know about group dynamics because it helps them figure out exactly how they can contribute to the group. And since introverts have a tendency to observe before they contribute, knowing the things that are needed to make a group work is the perfect tool for them. So you'll have task-oriented behaviors, you'll have maintenance-oriented behaviors, and you'll have self-oriented behaviors. If you have a group that's full of any one of these, your introvert is going to know that they have to change their energy in order to make that group more cohesive and productive. Introverts, again, are not shy. It's not that they can't initiate. They just need to know if that's something that they are going to be asked to do so they can prepare for it and be ready to do it. One of the last things that I want to share for you as far as strategies go is an oldie but goodie. We've been talking about wait time since the 70s, when researchers noticed that after we pose a question, we give less than a second for people to actually answer that question. That kind of goes back to the slide where I was talking about scary silence. As a teacher, you can't be afraid of the silence in that classroom, especially if you know, because you've taken an inventory of a class. If you're dealing with a lot of introverts, doesn't mean they're not thinking. Give them time. You as a teacher may have to talk less. No, that's going to hurt you unless you're an introverted teacher. But give them a chance to develop what it is that they want to think. So let's say you ask a question that has great depth to it, and your extroverts and your introverts, they raise their hand, they're ready to go, they're giving quality answers to it. After they've answered, I'd encourage you to have another beat after that great answer has been given and say, what else? Instead of who's next, you're just asking, what else would someone like to contribute to it? Also, give time within, after you get to a section in maybe a classroom discussion, go back and say, okay, of the things that we've talked about, does anyone have anything else they would like to contribute to any of those points? You may find that an introvert has been thinking the whole time about something that will change the dynamic of what you're studying or even help you transition into the next skill. So you're using the introvert strengths to help contribute to that learning. So we do have that portion as well. So here's some resources for your students. If you have a student who is introverted, it is very crucial that they learn how to harness the power that they have. I know that when I read Quiet by Susan Cain, I felt like she had been reading my journals, and in my headspace, I wasn't aware of how many people there were in the world who were wired like I was wired. And what it provided for me was legitimacy to the way that I thought. So I didn't belittle myself for not being the person who is very, very quick to speak. And at the same time, it empowered me to still pursue leadership as an introvert, knowing that I wasn't excluded from that. Your students need that also. So Susan Cain also has a book called Quiet Power: The Secret Strengths of Introverts. It goes through things like restorative practices that students can use to help them recharge throughout a very busy day. That includes headphones. Even if you are given nothing is going through those headphones, it gives you some distance between expelling a lot of energy. It also talks about how does an athlete who's an introvert, how do they navigate their world? A student leader who is an introvert, how do they navigate their world? There's also a site called The Quiet Revolution. And The Quiet Revolution will have tools not just for students, but for those of us who teach introverted students. One of the things that's suggested is that we move from having participation grades to engagement grades. So if you're adding depth to the conversation, it's not just you talk this many times, but what have you contributed that strengthens what's going on in the classroom. So if there are any other resources that you can think of for students, again, add those into the conversation. For the teacher resources portion, I also have a personality inventory for you as well. So with that being said, since we're talking about resources for teachers, could you come in, Mr. Flores, and talk to us some about that?
I could come in and talk a little bit about that. If you don't mind switching the slide there. So we've had this discussion about to really define and clarify what introverts are, what introverts are not. And now we've had lots of strategies for the classroom. And I really wanted to talk about being an introverted teacher, because I know it surprises a lot of people that I'm an introverted teacher, because I am up in front of students all day long, and they just are surprised that I would be introverted in the first place when I have to present for a lifestyle. And as you know, when you get invited out to dinner parties, because everybody loves having a teacher at dinner parties to tell them all the creative ways they teach the Odyssey. When people find out I'm a teacher, they always seem to go and focus on the students and like, oh man, it's got to be such a tough job teaching students. And I'm always like, well, no, actually, the hard part is dealing with adults, right? Like that's where it takes a lot of the energy out, is like when you have to share part of the conversation time with adults and have no control over who's trying to come at you with information. We go to the next part. And even adults you like can be draining. These are some pictures from some team building exercises. Speaking of team building, with adults that I love, this is one of the best places I've ever worked. And still, you can see on my face, drained immediately, because all the team building exercises were designed for the extroverts. So I was not feeling like I was getting a lot of it. I was sort of checking out, and I was in my happy place, somewhere alone in my mind. So I want to talk about survival tips for introverts, and some of these might surprise you, especially as a professional. So number one, it's always good to have headphones, especially if you ever have like time where you're working on during your planning period, or if you have an office area, or even if you have an office area in your house. Nothing says, I'm not talking right now, like big, gaudy, bright headphones. Like have them, get them for cheap, look for deals on them. I think they're so useful, especially if you're ever flying. Like if you're flying on airplanes, you always risk that sitting next to someone who's a little chit chatty. You just put those headphones on, you wear them on the plane, eyes focused, eyes in front, don't make eye contact. I like a little bit of a mix between jazz and hip hop music. So I have a link there. I don't know if it'll work on the PDFs, but chill hop music seems to be the best for my productivity time, for my relaxing time too, just to have that in the background. And so I love to have chill hop music, even when we're just around the house. And even my son, who's a little bit of an introvert, we'll just put that on in the background while we play silently in the same room together. My second big tip, and this should come as no surprise, is always carry big books around. And that will hopefully dissuade some conversations, because obviously it looks like you got stuff to do. Now, I know that sometimes that also invites conversation, because someone will ask you, well, how is that book? But you can be strategic about that too. One that no one asked me about is when I was reading a book called White Fragility. Like, nobody wanted to talk to me when I was reading Robin DaCosta's White Fragility. Like, that was really interesting. But I also have a couple introvert specific reading suggestions on there. If you want to like go the electronic route, introvertdeer.com is a great blog with tons of just great articles about being an introvert and survival techniques. And Intro Flirted is just a really funny, it's like Valentine's Day cards for introverts. It's really funny too. Now, my third one is really about religion. And it's to have some sort of hobby that's good for you physically that you follow religiously. My partner and I, we did a presentation just last year at NCTE about just the benefits of exercise on brain development and reading. And so we have that as a link there to our research called Lit Fit. And you want to stay lit fit, and that kind of helps take away the stress and does re-energize you when you have that one solitary activity that you do. Probably don't want to do anything like team sports like basketball or doubles tennis. No, that's exhausting. You want to do something that's a little bit by yourself, like running, which is one of the best exercises you can do for your brain. Shocking, right? Number 4 is always have an exit strategy. And I really thought about this because it is something I've been guilty of doing, especially if you're at a conference or if you're going to be on a long faculty day PD session. You always have to have those little time periods where little excuses planned ahead for a reason to step out of being around the crowd and then recharge and then get back in. Again, back to my current introvert crush, Mindy Kaling, that I showed earlier. She calls it the Irish goodbye, which maybe you've been guilty of doing this, where you'll be at a party and say, oh, you know what? I forgot something in my car. And you get in your car and you leave. I think that's hilarious. And number 5, I think to know yourself as an introvert, I think it is helpful. I like taking those personality tests. And so here are the different types of introverts here listed at the bottom of the screen. And one of my favorite free personality tests that I like to do with faculty, that I like to do with students, is the 16personalities.com to see exactly what kind of introvert or extrovert you are. And then you can sort of team up accordingly, know your own strengths and your own weaknesses, and then team up with somebody that can mix and match. Like, I know some people think it's a good strategy to go to a party and take an extrovert along with you so they can do all the talking. Well, I think that I've actually found just the opposite is true for me. If you go to the next slide. So this is part of my 6th strategy. Teaching itself, as we know, is a very private. It can be a very isolating endeavor, which is why we do have these faculty meetings and these department meetings where we're shoved in the same room together and we're doing team building exercises and we're trying to build that rapport with each other. But that is very draining when you have to share that time with groups of like 4, 5, 6 all on the same team, and you're just fighting for air to like share ideas, express ideas. And especially if the facilitator doesn't know about that think, pair, share, and wait time. Go to the next slide. There you go. Now, creating itself, we know we're very productive as introverts. Like, we like creating, and I myself am guilty of this. I need, just like President Obama, I need my hole to create and be isolated off from distraction and just be focused on creating a new lesson plan, creating a new resource for teachers. And that only perpetuates the loneliness, though, if we never get out and talk about the resources we're creating. So my 6th tip is it helps to find a co-survivor as an introvert. I know it sounds counterproductive, but introverts, we need each other. Like, we need to find each other at a conference, and we need to let someone who we trust know, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed because I've had 80 people come talk to me today. I don't know any of their names. Can we just escape to a coffee shop just for a second? And I just want to sit with you and look busy and not say anything. Like, that would be great to have that help with me. It has to be someone that you can trust and is that fellow risk taker that is willing to talk about really engaging lesson plans that are outside of the curriculum box. And so my co-survivor in here, she's an INTJ, which is she has very opposite qualities to me, where I'm more improv off the cuff. She's very structured, down to earth. And so we seem to really work together. But there are some like guidelines for our working processes that I think help other people to find their own co-survivor. We'll go to the next slide. We'll cover those too. So we really are big fans of Penny Kittle, and we follow her advice that we can't teach something that we don't practice. So as professionals, we practice with each other the same sort of skill sets that we do in the classroom. We read, we write, we talk, we don't talk, we brainstorm, we hold each other accountable and call each other out, have fun. And these are all processes that we want to do with our students as well. We've actually written 2 articles about it, which I don't know that the links will work on the PDF that are attached to this website, but we do have links up here where you can go view them out, where we talk about, and we co-wrote these articles talking about, discussing, and sharing what we feel are our professional responsibilities as teachers to be active readers and active writers. And so we're very proud of that, kind of to put ourselves out there and share to the world that we're introverts, we're here, and we're proud of it. Now, the part of this process too, between all the reading and writing and not talking and talking, is that we also have learned that we have to celebrate any of our victories. And that's something I don't think teachers do nearly enough. We're always looking at the data and looking at what we need to do next and never stopping to just take time and saying, hey, we got this kid from a B to an A. We got this kid from an F to a D. Like, let's high five about that and just take a moment to just appreciate the small victories. And so we always have a small victory after doing PD presentations, after publishing articles. And that is also part of why we make really good co-survivors together. So we all need someone to retreat with from the performance stage, somewhere safe to go to and celebrate those wins, someone to work with and throw ideas back and forth, and then someone to also say, okay, I'm done brainstorming with you. I got to go. Bye. Talk later soon. Those are my big 6 takeaways for being an introverted teacher and surviving this profession and growing and thriving.
Thank you, Josh. I love the idea of finding a partner. I hadn't really thought of that before. I think it's such a great strategy to really find your introvert pair at a conference. I've spent too many years, I think, going around just trying to survive on my own. And I think it gives you permission, perhaps, I don't know, social permission to go and sit with someone at a coffee shop who also won't talk to you maybe for a little while, and you all can sit there and go over your notes. But if you're sitting with someone, it feels more acceptable to do that as well. So that's great. Thank you. I'm going to talk about honoring our introversion because I am in a position of, I think all teachers are in a position where you're just surrounded by people all day long, kids, colleagues, administration. And for me, it becomes overwhelming. I am in a leadership position where, people come to me with questions all day long, whether in person or via email. And at points, even the email sometimes feels draining to me because there's so much that I have to attend to. So I'm going to talk about how I've structured my work life as well as my personal life so that I am more productive in my work life. So I want you who's watching right now or later on in the future to really be thinking about what is it that you need in order to honor your introversion. So moving on, this is me happy. I am delighted in this moment. This is me feeling like joy. This is me feeling content. This is me feeling like I can take on the world. This is me. That morning, I was sitting on my porch. I had my coffee, which you can see there, which I have here too. I have the New York Times book review, which is my favorite Sunday morning activity. I am reviewing a manuscript for a colleague there and writing notes and giving her feedback. And I also have, you can see in the corner there, that little piece of red. That's the book that I was currently reading at that point. That's like all of my pieces, right, that I need right there to bring me joy and to recharge myself. Additionally, my kids are on the other side of the wall and they're older, so that's fine. They can take care of themselves. But my family is nearby, which also makes me happy, and they can re-energize me when they're not going crazy. But it is truly me happy. Some people would walk by on the street and feel like me just sitting there on my own is an invitation to chat, which is fine. I can chat too, but sometimes I really, the earbud suggestion that Josh gave, like plug myself in, really gives the signal often, because when I'm reading, I'm not listening to anything, but it's just a signal. It's not that there's music coming through my ears. It's just, I am doing something. Please don't talk to me, because I am recharging. And that is me truly happy. And similar to what Natalie said earlier, I was just so enlightened when I read Susan Cain's book, Quiet. I tend to love people who are extroverts. I've mentioned my friends, my roommate from college and graduate school, she's an extrovert. I just surround myself with people who are more outgoing, I think, because I need that support, and they're awesome. But I thought that there was something wrong with me. And so after reading Susan Cain's book, I became more and more comfortable with saying, oh, I'm an introvert. And I don't think that that's a bad thing to do, because I feel as though people, when you explain to people what that is and differentiate the difference between shy and introverted too, which is a big thing, people understand and honor that, and understand why in a large meeting, when we have, for example, our big admin team meetings and there's 24 people around a table, I tend to just be a little quieter, though later on I can have a conversation with one or two of my colleagues and be a little fiery if I need to, or at least speak my mind a little bit more. But when, we're having a 2-hour meeting, by, 90 minutes in, I'm pretty drained at that point. So last summer, 2 summers ago, I actually did a TED Talk kind of thing to my admin team, which talked about introversion for the point kind of similar to this, highlighting how we need to attend to our staff who are introverts, but also just to call it out for myself. Like, it was a kind of one of those empowering moments of, hello, my name is Heather Rocco, and I am an introvert. And it's interesting to see kind of how people interact with me actually a little bit differently then, since they know that. It's funny, like people will be like, oh, her door's closed, let me keep going, because they know I'm doing that for a reason. I'm not just being mean. I've also made a commitment to now design a workspace that really feels like me. So on this slide, I have 2 pictures of, one is of my office, which I recently kind of redid with all leftover furniture that was getting moved around to other places in the building. But I used to just have like a big desk in the middle of my office. And it was, I don't know, it just didn't feel like me. I like low lighting. So I have lamps. I don't use the fluorescent overhead lights. I've got these beautiful blue walls, books everywhere, but it feels like a calming space to me, so that then when I get to move into that space for 15 minutes or so, in between meetings, it actually does help me recharge. I've created a physical environment that helps my recharge. Additionally, the picture on the left, we moved at home a couple of years ago, and I've just begun to work on my office space, which is what I'm in right now. And before, it just had stuff everywhere because we moved and there were boxes. But for my birthday, I actually asked for that little chair that's back there. And then these are all, I love to take pictures too. So these are all pictures of mine, and it's a calming space for me. I chose a pink color that feels good to me. So it feels like a place that I can recharge. And then my last recommendation, and I have a little addition to this, but close your door. If you have the opportunity to close your door, I know when we were planning for this session, Natalie talked about even telling students yeah, no, my lunch is my lunch. I need to be in my classroom by myself for 15 minutes because it is your time to recharge. So again, in my transparency, I've said to teachers, et cetera, that sometimes when my door is closed and I do what Josh recommends, I'll put my earbuds in. Sometimes there's music, sometimes there's not, because there's a window for my office so people can see and they can see that I'm in there. But I'm doing it because I just need that 15 to 20 minutes of recharging. Additionally, I'll also say, and I was thinking about this morning, I really try and manage my day to allow, like, schedule in my recharge time. And I was thinking about it because I failed miserably at it on Thursday, where I had scheduled myself from 8 until 2 with no break. I was just going from one to the next to the next. And even though I was doing all these great things that I loved, by the time I got to 2 o'clock and then I was scheduled to make a phone call, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just felt kind of drained at that moment. So be mindful. If you have whatever time you can control over your schedule, if you have that control, or if it's dictated by bells, just make sure that you are kind to yourself and allot yourself that time for quiet and peace and recharge, because it does make you better in the long run. So as we we're starting to draw to a close here, I'd ask for you, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of introverts out there, because what's better than an online conference all day long, right? Like, this is made for us. So as you're thinking about how you go about recharging, if you have an idea or something that you do that's particularly meaningful and useful to you, I encourage you to tweet it out so that we can all learn from each other. So for me, my recharge takes all different forms. So this is me in Maine, actually at a friend's house. I love lakes. I love water. So that, of course, is, and who doesn't love a fire pit? Come on. But there are lots of ways that I recharge. So moving to the next slide, I do run, like Josh had talked about. So I love to run. I love to kayak. I love to write. A lot of pictures have my dog in it, I'm realizing as I'm going through. I hang out with my dog, who is a good lap dog. I love to sit and watch a baseball game because I love baseball. So that is something that I do at the end of the day. I love to garden. And I have my own little community plot in my town where I go and I put my earbuds in, because some people like to chat there, and just tend to vegetables. It's very, very important to me to have that. And then that last little picture that I have there, I really love to go to lectures and poetry readings. I go to book signings. And even though there's lots of people there, we're all there for the same reason. And that does help me to recharge. However, and perhaps it appears in contradiction, but I love, and introverts do love, to get involved with things. We just have to be more judicious about what we love to do. So I've made purposeful decisions about what I give my time to when it involves kind of collaboration. So the three of us are connected because of an organization called the Conference on English Leadership. That's how we've met, and we've been on EC, the Executive Council for several years, which is a group of people, but we're working toward a common purpose, which is supporting literacy leaders. So that always feels nurturing, or nourishing for me. There's Natalie and I actually hanging out after the meeting in one of those pictures. I can do that too. I can hang out after. We've also added a book club element to it where we hang out and talk about books too, because we're all nerdy. But I've also been involved in NCT's Advocacy Day for the last couple of years, where you go to Capitol and meet with policymakers and lawmakers to advocate for education, which is work that it's challenging for me because I don't know many people in that photo there with the Capitol building behind us. I know a few, and it's really out of my comfort zone also to go in with policymakers and talk with them, but it's important to me. So that's why I feel kind of excited and empowered to do that. So getting involved with things that I love also feeds my soul. If, again, I allot myself 5 minutes at the end of the day to recharge. 15 is preferable. Okay, so we're wrapping up here. Susan Cain says, solitude matters. And for some people, it is the air they breathe. And I feel as though the three of us here today do feel that it is part of the air we breathe, and that we cannot breathe should we not be given that time to have on our own to recharge. So as you are thinking about, the recharge is really critically important. So as you think about what nourishes you, I want you to be purposeful and think about what do you do to recharge. So I'm going to toss that question out to my colleagues here, Natalie or Josh. Is there one thing that you do here? We've got about 2 minutes left that is particularly important to your recharge. Josh.
I think, again, for me, exercise, which I think is a running theme, because if you listen to the keynote speaker, even he was talking about exercise, and he did American Ninja Warrior, which is one of my son's favorite shows, and boxing and MMA. And I have a heavy bag in my garage. I think having that in my own home space has been so beneficial for me to just go do 20 minutes on the heavy bag and just clear my mind, just kind of clear the cache of the day, so to speak.
I find when I'm in spaces where a lot of people are, I'm naturally drawn to the outside of those spaces. I don't want to be in the center. Just the physical distance that can be created in large spaces oddly relaxes me, oddly gives me a moment to regroup and recharge.
I do the same thing. Maybe that's how we met, because we were both standing on the perimeter of a conference hall. Because I prefer to be outside rather than inside. I think that's a great strategy when you don't have the opportunity to leave and go into a hallway or back to your hotel room or go home to recharge. So lastly, last slide is, we also have to have a sense of humor about it. So that cartoon makes me laugh. But I think if we are mindful of the introverts in our classroom, the introverts in our departments, in our schools, as well as who we are as introverts, that it will allow us to actually be more productive and engage students in a more meaningful, exciting way that feels purposeful, that will help to bring them along, as well as to design a department or create a department that feels collaborative and purposeful. I know I already said that, but empowering. Somebody tweeted out empowering, which Natalie said during her part. It is empowering for an introvert to be and feel recognized for who they are. So thank you, Josh. Thank you, Natalie, for a great morning. We are moving into session 2, which will begin at noon Eastern time. Here are the session offerings. They are up on the screen, so you can kind of take a moment, go refill your cup of coffee, get yourself a snack, some lunch, and settle in and be excited for session 2. And I hope that you are able to stay with us throughout the entire day of this great Ed Collab gathering, which offers such a great array of sessions for you and designed perfectly for introverts. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Have a good day.
See you the rest of the day. See you next session.
Bye.